Now, you can see those in the lists up top. Within the lists, we have the all lists here, where we have the chart of accounts. That's going to be the number one ground baseline thing that we need. But that is also located, and I more commonly go to it by going to the transactions tab on the left-hand side and then into the chart of the accounts. Now, the chart of accounts kind of fits into this transactions, but notice that the transactions is basically where QuickBooks is putting some of the oddball type of stuff. So within the transactions, they have currently the bank feed information. So instead of calling it banking information tab over here, as it has been, in the past, they're just calling it transactions, which most likely on a day-to-day basis, you will be using the bank feeds most often within here, but calling it transactions allows them to also kind of dump some things like the reconcile tab and the chart of accounts, as well as the recurring transactions. So bottom line, they could move the chart of accounts, possibly, because that's what they do in a web-based software, but it will always be somewhere, and typically, if we can't find it anywhere else, it'll be under the cog up top in the lists. So let's go into that chart of accounts. Let's close up the ham boogie. Now, note that if you start a new company file, QuickBooks will usually give you a baseline type of chart of accounts. And so that's going to give you a list of accounts on which we construct our financial statements using the chart of accounts when we make our normal transactions done with the forms, which are under the plus button. So in order for the forms to record a transaction in accordance with the double entry accounting system, at least two accounts being impacted with every transaction, and therefore with every form, unless the form's not recording any transaction, and having the accounting equation remain in balance, assets equal liabilities and equity, we need the chart of accounts. All right, now, so when you first get the chart of accounts, if you start up a new company file, QuickBooks the online version doesn't usually distinguish between different types of industries providing different chart of accounts, which you might be used to if you have the desktop version. In other words, in the desktop version, when we started a new company file and we told QuickBooks Desktop, we said, hey, this is the type of industry we are in. We sell inventory, or we don't sell inventory, or I'm a construction business, I'm a restaurant. Then they would actually have a customized chart of accounts more geared to that particular industry, whereas in the online version, they don't really do that so much. So as we will see in future course or presentations, when we start up a new company file, you will tell the system, hey, this is the industry that I'm in. This is the kind of business that I have. This is the structure, partnership, corporation, S corporation, and whatnot. But those will not typically have the same kind of impact in the default chart of accounts that will be created. Instead, QuickBooks basically making a fairly monstrously large chart of accounts, monstrously large because they're trying to encompass the needs of a whole range of different businesses within that chart of accounts. That means that when you set up a new company file, there might be needed to have more work to customize the chart of accounts. So a couple things to keep in mind. If you're starting QuickBooks Online and you had a chart of accounts from a prior accounting software or possibly from QuickBooks Desktop, then you're possibly going to want to pull in the chart of accounts that you had before into QuickBooks Online as best you can, meaning you might actually kind of basically remove the chart of accounts that's currently in here and try to set up your own chart of accounts that lines up to what you had in the prior accounting system so that you can move forward seamlessly. If you're using QuickBooks Desktop, there might be some tools to more easily pull in that information as you do the setup process, given the fact that QuickBooks Online is trying to get at least small to mid-sized businesses to move into QuickBooks Online from the desktop version. But it's still not a seamless move because you are moving almost basically equivalent to a whole different type of software. QuickBooks Desktop, although owned by the same business, is basically totally different than the QuickBooks Online. Similarly, if you had another software like a Xero or something like that, and you wanted to go to online for whatever reason, QuickBooks Online, you might have to pull in the information from the prior system, and you want to set up your chart of accounts to match that, so you can pull in the beginning balances, which we will talk more about when we get to the part of the course or another course or section on starting up the new company file. If you're basically starting from scratch and it's a new business, or you're starting a new kind of accounting system within here, and you don't already have a chart of accounts, then it's going to give you, again, this monstrous kind of chart of accounts here. So your options then would be either you try to use this chart of accounts as, in essence, your default chart of accounts as you start to post to it, oftentimes posting to it with the use of the bank feeds. In other words, as transactions clear the bank and you pay for things like the phone bill, the utilities, and so on and so forth, you assign those transactions typically to mainly expense type of accounts. And you're going to choose expense type of accounts that have already been basically set up over here and hope that you can find a match. And if you cannot find a match, then you might want to look for something similar and then go into the chart of accounts and just change the name, alter the name to what you prefer, so that you don't have multiple accounts with similar names, which will be causing a problem. Or your second option, get rid of this monstrous chart of accounts and basically just create the accounts as you do the transactions, which leads to a more customized type of reports, because then you're only going to have the accounts that you're actually using rather than this big chart of accounts. If you're using the first method and you try to record to the current chart of accounts, because you don't have any idea what the accounts should be, and maybe this will give you an idea, then after a couple months of operations, you might then go into your chart of accounts, look for the accounts that have activity in them, keep those. The ones that do not have activity in them, you might decide to remove those accounts. And that's another way that you can at least clean up this huge chart of accounts to a smaller kind of contingent of accounts that are actually being used. All right, let's take a quick look at the structure of this thing. We've got the chart of accounts, feedback. We could run a report from here. On the new button, we can import information. So if we're importing accounts from, a prior accounting system, we can use the import. We can add a new account here. Also, we might add accounts as we do data input forms. For example, in the plus button, if I'm entering an expense form, and I had an expense that I've not seen before, I might add an expense type of account on the fly as we do the data input. Noting that if you're starting a new company file, then of course the first few months of operations are going to be posting to all new accounts, and you're laying down the foundation, which will make it easier in the future as you repeat, in essence, what you've done in the past. However, if you're starting bookkeeping in a company file already set up or going to working in an accounting department, you're not typically going to be adding new accounts as you go, but instead you're going to see what happened in the past and mirror those same kind of transactions in the future. In other words, the vendors that you are paying, for example, you're not going to create new accounts to post the expenses to. You're going to look where the expenses were posted last time and post to the same account so that you have consistency and comparability from period to period. All right, so then we have the batch items down here. So you could check these items on the right, which gives us our batch transactions up top, make inactive. We can search for our account with the search field, and then we have all and created by you. So that could be nice if you were saying, hey, look, I'm not sure I want to totally delete these accounts, but I basically want to use my own accounts, and we might be able to look at the accounts that were created by us versus not created by us. We have the batch edit tool over here. If I click on that, it's going to allow us to go in here and make the edits more quickly, which is something that you might do when you first set up the file, because again, you might go through this chart of accounts and say, I want to go through quickly and rename these accounts to what I think is more suitable to me. Let's go ahead and cancel that. We can print it. We have the cog button. This is going to show us basically how the headers here are formatted. You can see that we have the type, the detail type, the QuickBooks balance, and the bank balance, and we can include inactive. Now, inactive is And then we have the number of accounts. I kind of like to see more accounts down here so that when I scroll down, it keeps going on one field as opposed to having to go to the next list of accounts the way it is basically by default. When you have this long accounts, I like to keep on scrolling down that way typically.